some content here about 35 or 40 minutes worth of solid probably, and I will try to leave a fair amount of space for your questions. So please feel free to submit those in the box on the right side of the screen there. I will just note as well, you may see handouts over on the right side of your screen as well, and there's one particular document there called the Personal Leadership Transformer. This is one of the documents from one of the first Agile Leadership Academy sessions, and later on in the presentation I will introduce that. It's actually an interactive worksheet that we're just giving out as an example of the sorts of exercises that you'll see in the program. So with no further ado, we will get into it. Just briefly, a little bit about me, a little bit about the program. Again, the name is Arlen Banks, and I'm one of the founders of Lightspeed, and I helped with my business partner, Sanjeev Augustine, to create this program, the Agile Leadership Academy. We're just closing out the first year of it. And a very brief, just personal story here about the origin of this. Sanjeev and I founded Lightspeed, this consultancy, about 10 years ago in a month. And one of the things that we, of course, had to do is get a bit of support for ourselves as leaders. And so a few years back, we actually joined a program called Strategic Coach, which is an entrepreneur's training program, and we found ourselves quite enamored of the format, which basically consisted of quarterly, one-day offsite sessions. It was very nice for us to be able to get out away from our day job, so to speak, and to do some strategic planning together. So we decided to essentially copy that fundamental cadence of quarterly sessions, and wanted to apply it to our own specialties of Lean and Agile organizational design and to leadership. And so this is really the genesis of the Agile Leadership Academy. It's a long program. It's a year long with 4 sessions and has site visits in between. So I'll sort of sprinkle information about it out as we go along here. But one other thing I'd like to note is that last year we only served executives. So the folks who attended last year tended to range between about the director level and the executive vice president level. But we had a lot of requests from middle management who wanted to attend. And this year we've opened up a new track for them. So you'll see that management track, while the executives enjoy a year of 4 new sessions of content. So with all of that, let's get into the meat of things. We have organizational agility. A good question you might ask is why? Why should I care, and why should my organization care? We've got enough problems to worry about without trying to transform everything, perhaps. Well, I think the short answer is that you have little choice in today's society. We have a world that's very quickly changing in a lot of obvious ways, and a lot of the old guard are quickly going out of business. This has been happening. It's not new, but it has been accelerating, and I think a lot of this has to do with the fact that we're seeing a level of speed and alacrity that's being supported by new technologies, by a lot of new methods like these agile methods, by the proliferation of lean thinking, and so we're seeing a lot of pressure basically on companies to adapt or die. There's also the people angle here. Put simply, a lot of people are not entirely happy with their jobs. So you've got a lot of folks who come and they punch the clock and they show up at 9 and they leave at 5, and they don't really care about their day very much. In fact, they just as soon go somewhere else. And we, of course, you see with the millennial generation that there's certainly a willingness and perhaps even an eagerness and an interest to go different places and try different things and really jump ship at the drop of a hat when something else more appealing presents itself. So you could see this as perhaps a threat, but it's also, as many threats are, an opportunity if you flip it around. The question becomes, what can we do about all this? So it may help to look into some of the rationale behind this dissatisfaction we're seeing. And on the flip side, what sorts of things are motivating people? If you look at this little chart here, you may notice on the left side that a lot of the demotivators are around things like company policy and administration. And you see there, the second leading cause is supervision. So if you were to think of a lot of the things that I'm getting ready to say as eliminating those as dissatisfiers, I think you would be not too far off from much of the message I'm trying to send. Of course, we're also looking at taking advantage of some of the facets on the right and moving a lot of things positively forward and introducing new practices. But quite a lot of this has to do with, in fact, simplification, actually, decomplexifying organizations and trying to find ways to do things in more straightforward, faster, easier, and more humanistic ways. And you'll find that by empowering people and some of the other things we'll be discussing, you can get employees to step up to the plate and really not need as much direct oversight, which opens the opportunity for leaders to do much more interesting things with their time than constantly deal with unnecessarily drama and, if you will, over-complex bureaucracy and administrivia. So looking at this from a role and personal level for a moment, it's always fair to ask, why would people really want to do this on a personal level? And by this, I mean live within an agile organization. From your perspective as leaders, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that if you do this correctly, you can get an environment where basically much of your organization becomes self-reporting. The status of things, how things are going, whether initiatives are succeeding or failing, it all becomes a lot easier to see. And this has a lot to do with the rapid planning cadences and focus on delivery of things like agile team methods. But it also has to do with some of the newer and higher level practices at the program and portfolio level. So having a sense of what's going on at portfolio level is not a trivial question in a lot of companies. Things change very quickly, and trying to keep track of it at the higher levels when things are always changing at the lower ones can be a bit of a trick. The idea of being able to roll with the punches, of being able to see a change in a competitive stance or a change in the business environment and being able to rapidly adapt your company to that circumstance. This is something else that's a good promise. And then, of course, there's the fact of getting more done with less and getting it done faster, and at the end of the day, having a better product. And I think that latter point is at the heart of a lot of the more progressive ideas that you've seen of late that some of the large organizations out there are beginning to embrace. And I'll tell you a few stories about that too. But simply getting closer to customers. A lot of the DevOps movement has a lot to do with this, in fact, of basically amplifying and accelerating the feedback loops from, say, a lowly agile team, just sitting in the basement somewhere, instead of having them talk to no one but their own supervisors and their own internal stakeholders. A properly run DevOps organization is able to actually get out there and have those teams quite directly interface with their customers, see how they're using their products, and adapt the products in real time based upon that. And if that's done properly, that's quite superior to opinion-based decision making and the slow approval processes you'll see at a lot of classical organizations. So you get customers who are more engaged with your company, who will more readily tell you what they really need. And you'll be able to see the impacts on them as they go forward, so engendering a lot more customer loyalty, perhaps. And then for teams, there's all of the kind of the standard agile litany of benefits. It's a more human-centered approach, right? It values the idea that people rule their own destinies and that they ought to. And from your perspective as leaders, this also means, on the flip side, that they're directly accountable, whereas previously, perhaps, realistically, you were. And you're just hoping that they do a good job. So delegating a lot of the responsibilities to teams is a big part of this. Giving them opportunities to grow, giving them a closer connection to the actual purpose and mission of the organization, and letting them feel like they can take chances and grow as individuals. So a lot of benefits. It's an easy sell here. And I think at this stage, we're rife with metrics and examples of companies succeeding at scale with this now. You've got a lot of the DevOps initiative is allowing us to just release things more rapidly than ever before, deal with a lot more initiatives at once. You're seeing a lot more experimentation, the ability to go out and try, if you will, Horizon 3 style initiatives, new things, innovative ideas without a great deal of risk, without a great deal of investment, and without a great deal of ramp up. And we're able to do this not from the top down, so to speak, but from the bottom up, getting ideas from our own employees and simply giving them the space and the support to do something with those ideas. This is very likely, and has been demonstrated to have not just more engaged employees, but much better products. If you got people dreaming about the things they're building when they go home, you're going to get something more interesting than if they're just being forced to do it because that's how they keep their paycheck. So, to make this even more interesting, as it so happens, I did another webinar just a couple of weeks ago on the subject of Agile outside of IT. And indeed, Agile has been proliferating quite widely in areas both across business silos, so functional areas of an organization like marketing and human resources and finance and so on, but also in lots of areas, in lots of companies and environments and domains where there really is no technology at all, or it's more of a classical manufacturing organizations even are embracing a lot of these ideas. They're embracing it in education. So you see a lot of opportunities to use these ideas in a lot of different circumstances, and I think you'll see that idea as we move into the organizational design aspect. So what is an Agile organization? This is a fair question to ask, and truthfully, there are a lot of different answer sets that you'll find if you look around. But I'll take a cut at it here from a few different perspectives. Part of what you'd like from an Agile organization is a place where people feel like they own what they built, right? And I say end to end here, this really means that ideally we're talking about teams not just, say, building products or services, but also maintaining them operationally, perhaps even directly having some sort of input into the investments into these products. Where should they go in the future? And the more ownership that they feel at a local level, the faster they can move, for one, and again, the more engaged they're likely to feel. The idea of being able to rapidly run experiments. This has a lot to do with portfolio management, of course, how you spin up new projects, how they get approved, how they grow from perhaps someone's random idea. If you think of, for instance, Google's 20% time and classical things of that nature, you can give people the space to build things, but of course they also need at some point, if those things prove to be very interesting, a team to help them grow into a real product. So there's that whole facet of trying to create that sort of a dynamic portfolio management function, if you will. There's the idea of using Agile methods at a low organization and be able to use them effectively. So this is everything from the methods to the tool sets. And then, of course, the idea of rolling all this into a way that we manage products and govern our organization, the governance side of things. Looking at just a slightly different perspective, same general ideas, but taking the more lean approach here. And this comes actually from this particular table from one of our longtime friends at Nationwide Insurance, a gentleman named Tom Pater, who helped to lead quite a large-scale, impressive transformation of their IT organization some years ago, and is now continuing that in other areas. So you've got now this idea that we're really trying to, I'll call out one of those middle functions there, the idea of expert staff functions versus expert workers. This is the idea of trying to move away from people being deeply specialized in a certain area and therefore essentially having the necessity of having very large, complicated teams and projects because we have to have a specialization for everything, moving into the idea of more poly-skilled resources where you've got people who actually can do a number of things, and even if they're not the best at it, they at least understand it. So you end up with much lighter handoffs, if there are any handoffs at all, and you have people adopting the idea at a human level of the U-shaped work cell, which is a lean idea from the manufacturing side of things, where one person can perhaps build a product from beginning to end using machines that are arrayed around them in a single work cell. Think of that similar idea, except we're not talking about machines. We're talking about the tools and the products that people are building. You give people the tools to do the job they need collectively and holistically. The idea of go-see management, I'll call that as well, and the next line goes along with this. At Nationwide, for instance, they have folks like directors and vice presidents checking in not every few months on the project, not in star chamber sessions. They come to the team. How do they know what's going on with the project? It is on the wall in a visual management system, a physical one, and which is also, of course, electronic. But they use the physical walls primarily because they facilitate more direct interaction. Those directors and vice presidents aren't asking the teams how things are going in a punitive fashion or in a micromanaging fashion, but they're asking, what problems are you having that we can help support you for? What blockers do you need cleared? So it's a lot more lightweight process, honestly, and you get a lot more ground level understanding of what's going on from the leaders, and well, the workers feel like the leaders actually care and aren't just aren't just supervising them, but are supporting them. So this is really a key idea of getting out there and, well, getting your hands dirty a bit and getting directly interfaced with the teams. So of course, this is not exactly the way of the world just yet. In many companies, you see a lot of anti-patterns, which really drive quite against this. So you could view the role of an Agile leader in many ways as fighting the past, as finding new ways to do a lot of these classical functions, which are certainly deeply incumbent at this point and are entrenched and difficult to change. The idea of having teams working on 6 or 7 projects at once, or worse still, individuals having to hop from 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 projects at a time to others. This definitely diminishes not just the speed of delivery, but the ability of anyone to focus. It diminishes quality. It wastes a lot of time and context switching. There are a lot of problems, and they're obvious ones. And yet, there's a self-discipline issue at the portfolio level in many companies where there is an unwillingness to really set things aside. When the business asks for something, perhaps the technology group simply add it to a list, right, and end up multitasking more than they did before. The idea of trying to have physical environments that are good for Agile teams. You see more in the idea of open spaces and so on than you did previously, but still, there's a lot of work to be done there in many companies. HR, certainly a pet subject of mine at the moment, is I've got a book coming out on this subject, Agile Leader's Guide to HR, in about a month. That is an area that is changing rapidly, but still has a lot of work to do there as well. Trying to move away from having supervisors directly working with individuals and moving more towards team-based performance management and some other ideas there. So suffice to say, there are plenty of problems for leaders to deal with. And I believe that Lean and Agile methods offer a North Star, some fundamental principles and ideas that allow you to make the right choices when you're trying to change these things that fit your organization. You don't want to just copy what other companies have done. You want to do something that works for your company. So then let's turn this to the personal level here for a moment. If we agree that it's worthwhile to go out and do this, you might ask, how well does your company do this? You might see a poll that has just now popped up. I'm going to give you a few moments, and once we get a decent response to this, we'll move on. But the poll question is, my leadership team aligns with the principles and goals of an Agile organization, acting in concert towards this common goal. The reason I've asked this question is that very commonly, given the fact that I'm in an Agile consultancy, of course I run across leaders that like these ideas and want to promote them. But I just as frequently run across situations where they are the only leaders in the organization that want to promote it, and they're swimming upstream. Or perhaps they have 1 or 2 other advocates, but it is truly a rarity these days to find companies where the entire leadership team, from one silo to the next, are all really marching to the beat of the same drum, all agree this is a good idea, and are changing their own personal behavior and organizations in a way that drives towards it. I'll offer as an example, well, HR or finance, right, in companies in many cases. They don't necessarily fight or think that Agile is a bad thing. They just don't think it applies to them, perhaps. So you don't really see a lot of involvement at any level there. They're not fighting against it, but neither are they supporting it. So yes, the results have come in now, and we're seeing, indeed, as expected, we've got rarely there is the leading response, followed by sometimes. So I bet that's just as I was noting, that it happens in some silos and not in others. This is a big reason why this program exists. Even a company as small as Lightspeed with 2 leaders, you'll still see conflict, of course, and there's a necessity to bring it all out and deal with it and come to common objectives so we can work together. So what is an Agile leader? Let's look at that for a moment. I'm going to boil down a lot of the jobs, if you will, the foci of an Agile leader into a few core principles here. You're trying to build and support and nurture an environment, and this is both physically and virtually speaking, that, in which Agile methods can thrive, and there are some various aspects to that. The idea of getting people to manage themselves so that you can manage the system that supports them, and the idea of basically presenting yourself and being present at all levels. as we go forth, and leading directly from the fore, if you will, instead of from behind. So let's take a look at the first one here, the idea of an agile environment. There have been a lot more companies lately that have moved to the notion of, for instance, flexible work hours. And my organization is one of these, actually. We have a principle where people work when they want to, where they want to, as long as they get the job done, fundamentally. In areas like Washington, D.C., the traffic's pretty bad, right? In areas like San Francisco, it's terrible as well. So there are a lot of good reasons for doing these sorts of things. Just to tell a quick story here, one of the places that we visited this past year in the Agile Leadership Academy, during every session there's a site visit. And the first was to the Motley Fool. And you may be familiar with them, a financial services company. It's been around for a good while now. One of the first websites was theirs, actually. And they are really quite a progressive culture. A lot of interesting things happen there. For instance, they have shifted the focus of their human resources leadership from, if you will, trying to deal with negative events, that is poor performers, drama, things of that nature, to really strictly focusing on making their top performers as happy as possible. And this doesn't mean that HR no longer deals with any of the negative issues. They do, of course, but that's not where the brunt of their energy is going. It's not where most of their time is spent. So just to take a quick example, some time ago they had they had something of a traditional HR plan in place, and they put a lot of the aspects out of it to their organization and said, hey, what do you guys think about this? And began to come up with some new ideas about how to do it, following the feedback, and to do a lot of rapid experiments. So Agile style, straight up, they had some small teams. They went out, they created new policies, new things to try, tested them in real time with the organization, and adapted them on really a daily and weekly basis. And over the course of a few months, had revamped their program. Just for instance, when a new person joins the Fool, they begin on a Friday. They will come in the morning and quickly wrap up any of the administrivia, the paperwork, and so on. They've got that process fairly leaned out, so it doesn't take very long, about an hour or so. And then the person is given a snack cart, and they take it around to all of the other people in the organization who know they're going to be coming, mind you, and they let them pick a snack, right? A snack or a beverage out of the cart. The idea here being that it's a lightweight introduction. It's a way for you to meet all the other folks, and they're likely to be happy to see you since you're bringing them food. At that point, then you go through the day, you meet everyone, you learn a little bit about the culture and see the company, and then on that weekend, you're given a gift certificate to the restaurant of your choice with your significant other, so basically the idea there is your family will be happy that you joined the Fool as well. You'll be taking them out to dinner on their dime, and then when you arrive Monday, you're ready to start. People there have movable work desks. They can simply unplug and roll the desk somewhere else, and they do it quite frequently. They've got an open workspace, but also it's balanced. So they've got actually private spaces like little phone booths and other such things, kind of cute little areas for people to go and relax. So this is, it's just an example of a company that is built from the ground up to support the ability for people to work with one another without barriers, to be able to nonetheless have some privacy. So there's a balance between the collaboration and the ability to do focused creative work. And just a place that really focuses on the individual and making it a place where Agile teams can work effectively and they can reorient, adapt, change where and when and with whom they're working at the drop of a hat, among other things. So there's also this idea of self-management. This is more of a systems problem. So what we're really trying to drive towards is an environment where everyone is aware what's going on. That the need for explicit reporting as such is diminished dramatically because we try to set up systems that are self-reporting. Now, this has something to do with visual management systems, it has something to do with metrics, but it also has a lot to do with the idea of delegating authority down to the lowest levels. And so there are a number of tricks in the Lean and Agile toolkit that make this viable without it becoming chaos. I'll give another quick example here. So what you're seeing here is basically an illustration of various sorts of, if you will, team setups that you could have, and various reporting hierarchies and structures that you can see. And what we're really trying to do is, of course, drive to the right here more, trying to get up a situation where teams manage their own work. They're accountable for the success of things. They're accountable for reaching out for assistance when they need it, for noting when there are problems, and so on. There, as another quick story from the trenches here, one of the other organizations that we visited this past year was OPower. And OPower basically works on behavioral engineering to try to get people to spend, to basically use less energy. And they work on behalf, OPower does on the behalf of the utilities who get some benefits from this, right, when their customers use less energy. So they have been actually trying the idea of self-selecting teams lately. And this is one of a number of different ways to ensure and drive autonomy, essentially with some manner of preparation. So this is several weeks of getting together. What does an organization need to do? What are the initiatives that are on OPower's plate? What sort of skill sets do they require? What sort of knowledge do they require? So getting a lot of the contextual information together, and this is a small leadership team that did this. They set up a quick session where team members came in, and no one was preordained to any initiatives. So they did, over the course of largely one day, that kind of bled over into another day as well, the team members aligned themselves against initiatives. Well, it's worth noting they did, first of all, this happened very quickly, so that's nice. Second of all, they did a poll afterwards. How did people feel about where they landed? And, well, the results were great. We've actually got an article about this in the LifeSpeed blog if you're curious about more details. Just look up self-selecting teams. But they also asked why people went where they did. So what was the driving rationale for them choosing, to go towards one initiative versus another? And I bet if I ran a poll right now, you would probably guess largely the same thing that I did. I figured it would be one of two things. Either the people that they want to work with would be a driving factor. So I want to work with this, a friend of mine, or perhaps someone that I simply admire. And that was indeed a major factor, but it was the second most important factor. I also thought that maybe it would be more a matter of, that this project has sexy technology or is simply interesting conceptually to me on some level, and that would be a driving factor. And it was. But it was the third driving factor. As it so happened, the leading factor was that, well, OPower said this is the stuff that needs to be done, and the last few projects that were left on the docket that didn't get filled quickly, and there were a few, right, that nobody really wanted to go to initially, after some conversations, they got filled, and at the end of the day, in fact, that was what people said, was they stepped up to the plate because they needed to. Because the organization needed them to, and because they recognized that this was going to, it was their choice at the end of the day. They were never forced to do that. Someone had to pick it up, but they didn't have to. When they did, they knew they garnered more respect from their peers, from the management, and they knew that next time things would probably go more their way, and they'd find something a little more interesting, on a personal level. But at the end of the day, simply the ability to choose one's own work really is a dramatic factor. And I'll just mention a bit off the cuff here. I just got back from lunch with actually a customer and client of ours, and he was noting a fascinating example of in his own organization, which is a very large secondary mortgage organization over here, let's just say, and basically gave the ability for a few of his team members to go and just solve an ambitious problem that he laid out for them, a problem with some data, and lo and behold, they got done in a matter of weeks what would have traditionally, would have been a problem for years, right? They solved it all on their own with no guidance about how. It was a very small team, and it was a fantastic solution that's already saved many millions of dollars over the course of just a few months. So this is from nothing more than saying, hey, here's an ambitious problem. You guys think you can handle it for me? And they went off and did the rest, right? So it sounds scary, but letting go of the reins can yield much better results, better deliveries, and much more engaged people who have their brains fully allocated towards the problems you're asking them to solve, rather than being split between doing their work and looking good to you while they're doing their work, right? So That this is a major factor, and it still is a bit of a cutting edge thing, but it's something you should consider. As the final facet of personal leadership, there's the idea of presence, right? This is the work of Daniel Goleman, and certainly he's been around for a while and has a lot of thoughts on the idea of focus in particular. He notes 3 different facets of focus: inner, other, and outer. Inner focus is, of course, self-awareness. I'll sort of move to the next section here. Self-awareness, self-management, so being able to understand yourself and how well you're doing on things, and to manage your own work set, of course. The outer is understanding the business environment, understanding competitive forces, understanding environmental factors, being able to read the future, things of that nature. So understanding the bigger picture, the context of the environment in which you exist. And then perhaps the other side is one of the more interesting things. This is being able to empathize and engage with the people with whom you work, other stakeholders, customers, users, understand their perspective, and be able to basically align with that and set up an environment where, for instance, teams can collaborate more effectively. This is a lot of the emotional intelligence side of things, if you will, the social awareness side of things. So a lot of these are facets which are important for an Agile leader. It's a very big portion of this is being able to let go to the appropriate degree. And it's a bit of a balance you have to strike between letting go enough and letting go too much. There is such a thing as relegating your responsibilities and to no one, and then things simply don't get done. So there's a process of being able to grow leaders in your ranks and to gradually transfer the reins over to them as you feel comfortable that they're able to take them and run them effectively. And so with that, I wanted to introduce a tool here. Actually, I've got a question coming through, so I will pause for just a moment before I jump into this and answer it. The question was, how does a difficult problem compare with an ambitious problem? That's an interesting question. What I would say is an ambitious problem is one that is seen as perhaps achievable. I don't know that I would draw a direct distinction between them, if I'm being perfectly honest about it. But I think an ambitious problem is, by its nature, probably difficult but achievable. And I think you can also set up targets that are, in fact, currently unachievable and knowingly so, but just as aspirational goals. So I think actually, often as leaders, we use both of those perspectives. So for very long-term strategic planning, often you set up the idea of goals that are truthfully not capable of being obtained at this point, but at some point in the future, with advances in technology, realignments, reorganizations, those results have been seen elsewhere. So it's possible, just not yet here. I'd say an ambitious problem is just saying, here's something that we have not yet solved. It's something that would be great if we could. It may or may not be viable in terms of being worthwhile as an investment, but it's worth investigating. And I guess I would tie a lot of that back into, again, the idea of setting up an innovation pipeline that allows you to quickly realize such things. Because often the answer of whether something is difficult or impossible is not entirely evident until you get into it a little bit. So quite a lot of these of Agile methods and so on, you could regard them as tools for exploration at a leadership level. They're things that allow you to go out and with a limited knowledge of a domain or a problem space, to test the waters and get a sense, in fact, of what is and isn't possible there and what's going to be most beneficial, perhaps. So that'd be some thoughts there. Turning back to the presentation, you'll notice this is the handout I was referring to. If you look on the right, that personal leadership transformer. In every one of these Agile Leadership Academy sessions, what we've tried to do is to truthfully, to abstract out a lot of the concepts that you see across the whole litany of Lean and Agile methods out there. So we're drawing from Scrum, from the Lean Startup, from DevOps, from design thinking, from Lean Six Sigma, from many, many different sources, the kind of varied backgrounds that largely myself and my business partner have in our work histories. And we try to basically do that to de-jargonify all of this stuff. To try to make it accessible and relevant really across different domains. So this, for instance, is an abstraction of some of the if you will, self-learning ideas that you as a leader might take up to try to improve yourself, to try to improve your practices. I'll just briefly note what they are, and if you click on that, you'll notice it's an interactive PDF. So you can go and you can actually click those little circles and fill in the boxes down below and set up a personal plan to get started. Focusing on developing people over enforcing processes. This is the idea that while you certainly may enforce processes, and there's nothing wrong with that as such, the notion is that that isn't where the majority of your energy goes. You're not primarily micromanaging. You're primarily growing. You're growing leaders. You're growing people's skill sets. And that is really where much of your energy goes. The processes, well, they by and large run themselves because that's how awesome your company is. The next one, learning continuously. This is it's just as it says. If you look back at your past couple of years, you've picked up a lot of new skills. You've kind of transformed yourself, and as the world has moved along, so have you. You've tried new things. Just hearkening back to the Motley Fool for a moment, I'll note they do this all the time at leadership levels. I know that at one stage, their CIO became their CFO, right? Which is a bit of an unusual switch, but you see a lot of this is, in fact, to keep people with a fresh perspective, to make sure that people don't get stuck in their ways, that they are able to actually live in the other guy's shoes, so to speak, and therefore when they switch from one role to the next, they feel the pain of that previous role, and they're able to therefore work more effectively with them. Clear communication, but letting teams decide the how, if you will. The idea of reaching across the silos to your peers and effectively generating flow. What I mean by this, if you are familiar with the idea of customer journey mapping, value stream mapping, things of this nature, this is the way a lot of companies are moving away from the notion of trying to set up projects within different departments, different silos, and run them as isolated things, or perhaps having any given project cross many silos in different functional areas. You basically try to set up more cross-functional groups from the get-go, so that flow is much easier to achieve, really from the idea to being out in production, so to speak. And then the idea of actually having data drive our decisions. A lot of companies don't have good data. This yet again is one of the big things that DevOps initiatives tend to try to push. Actually generating useful information that lets us pick the next right project to do and the next key feature we need to build or key service adjustment we need to make. A lot of companies still, truthfully, they're doing it with perhaps reading a few articles and making some gut check decisions. And while this is appropriate in some cases when you don't have anything better, you'd of course rather have realistic data. So these are some of the ideas about how you can look and say, am I growing myself as a leader? At the bottom there, you'll see the list 3 ways to try to improve your personal leadership agility. Quite often, the way this is working is you can only do so much over a certain period of time, right? So if you were to show up at this workshop, the notion would be that you leave with a handful of things between this session and the next session a quarter later that you can take and try. And in the meantime, there are mentoring calls and some other things to support you along the way. But a lot of the interesting conversations that we actually saw in the current cohort came from workshops like this, because basically leaders talk to one another across companies, and you get an interesting sharing of stories at the personal level. So quite often someone else has the secret sauce for whatever problem you're encountering, and that's a lot of the beauty of the session. And that's really what Sanjeev and I have enjoyed about our own training sessions at Strategic Coach that I mentioned as well. So this is one of many examples of these various explorers, transformers, simulations, and so on that we have throughout the program. You're just seeing a handful of them here. Every session has at least 4 of these that we create, and they vary all over the place. They're everything from coming up with simulating things like DevOps team formation and structures, simulating the construction of actually visual management systems and portfolio boards, picking scaling methods based on your particular organization's challenges and opportunities. A lot of different ideas in different areas, the product angle, the scaling angle, and so on. So these are a lot of fun, and they vary quite widely. So kind of moving into the idea of the Agile Leadership Academy and really why you should care about this program, I just wanted to share a little bit more with you about how it works and what it is exactly. And some of the benefits we see. So I mentioned the site visits. One of the other ones that we did that was really nice was OPower, actually. I mentioned them a moment. They actually allowed us to sit in on a virtual global PI planning session. So this is a release planning session, a program increment, a SAFe style, a scaled agile framework style planning session that they're conducting across several offices. So you actually see that up at the top there. We were sitting in the room as they were conducting this using Jira for portfolio management, making simple notes about dependencies across various teams with real-time conversations. And this entire session was a couple of hours. So really quite a rich example there of being able to get in and do that. I'll also mention one of the other, the final site visit of the cohort last year was to U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, where some of you may or may not be aware, but they actually have one of the most advanced technology practices in the government today. They have a DevOps team they call Skynet, cheekily enough, and they really are seen as leaders across much of the government. The CIO of USCIS, a guy named Mark Schwartz, is quite well known in this particular area as being a major advocate of Agile methods and has provided a lot of support to get them to the cloud, to get them to being able to do multiple releases per week. There was a gentleman named David Blair who was really Mark's lieutenant, who helped to lead a $2 billion program using Agile methods and to really transform their entire portfolio management practice and to very rapidly build a pretty robust DevOps practice. DevOps is a platform, they call it, which is being used as a sort of self-service model by the standing teams in the organization. So really very interesting stuff, looking at these forward-thinking practices in a lot of other companies. And for the record, the last of the companies was Walmart, a local division of Walmart, where they are, in fact, transforming toward the idea of standing teams as well. That is, teams are not formed around projects, but rather they align against value streams, which represents the retail giants' various product and service lines. So a lot of really, obviously these are very large government organizations, large traditional organizations, small cheeky companies. So a lot of variety to what we see out there. We spoke with the folks in the program because in Agile fashion, we try to, of course, change this as we go along to make sure that people are getting what they need out of it. We said, what did you like, right? Well, what's good about the session? What did you not like about the session? And one of the core benefits that they mentioned was simply the ability to get in with their peer executives and have the tough conversations that did tend to happen at the home office. And this was often facilitated by the presence of people in other companies that have already noted that they've successfully implemented a given initiative or practice or tool or technique in their organizations, which gave people the courage to speak up. There was also this idea of, since it's a year-long program, you don't have to come into a meeting and then leave in alignment, right? We all know that doesn't happen. So it allowed actually this to happen over the course of that entire year, trying a little something here, having it fail. So some of the people who came to the session implemented a number of the practices that we talked about, or they tried to. They met resistance, and some of them went forward and some of them failed. And we got to hear about all that at the end of the program as they did report out. So it's got a little bit of the feel of an MBA session near the end, where we're trying to make sure that people are actually trying this stuff so that we can, in fact, prove that they've done something and begun to apply some of the practices. So that was very useful and interesting. I got to hear both where it worked and where it didn't. So there's also the idea of letting people sort of relax a little bit and have more open and honest conversations. So once you get back from the site visit, we tend to have a little happy hour and get together, which is very nice, right? It allows people to sit back and unwind and have a glass of beer or wine and have some real nice food from Morton's and see the nice sushi there and so on. So it's very nice, right? We try to do it up properly at an executive level and make it a relaxing and invigorating experience, if you will. So one other aspect of the program I'll mention, in addition to, you've got the site visits and the happy hours. These happen in a half day. The next day is a workshop. And then in between each of these actual on-site sessions, we have mentoring calls. We have them monthly, and we have a whole host of mentors, all of whom are actually executives themselves. I'm one of those, of course. My colleague Sanjeev is one of them. Our head of coaching, Bob Payne, our longtime colleague, Roland Cuellar. Just examples, we've got numerous others. These mentors are often people that you will meet at the sessions. They help to co-train. They often are experts that present in their own right, sometimes during after the site visits, before the happy hours. So they're there basically as sounding boards. As people actually go forth with their personal plans, of course, they encounter challenges. And so this gives them an opportunity to just talk through it with us and to adjust their plans as they go along. And indeed, many people took advantage of that, and you know, that was seen to be quite a valuable aspect. Some not quite free consulting, if you will, but all baked into the program. So with this, I will begin to bring it to a close and just open up the line for further questions about any of these topics. You know, we are just getting ready on June 12th to begin next year's cohort. And again, this is in fact 2 cohorts. There's going to be the continuation of the executive program from this year, where absolutely you can jump right in, and the sessions are not in any particular order, really. They all stand alone, more or less. So it allows you to enter at the middle of the program without necessarily losing the thread or feeling lost. We try to make sure every session stands alone. And then the management track, which is actually starting with the program that we did last year. The content is the same. It's just the fact that we try to ensure that you're actually in the same cohort as your peers, as people at similar levels of the organization, so that you have relevant stories to tell one another. There are a lot of joint conversations and so on that really wouldn't be useful if people can't appreciate your context and position. So there's that. And you can see some of the various topics that we have here for the various tracks. We will continue to grow these tracks as we go along over the years. So absolutely, if there are any topics that those of you in the audience are interested in hearing about, we'd like to hear it. We bake in special presentations in the midst of these as we go along and try to address the things that people really would like to hear about. So I would encourage you to take that worksheet and give it a shot. See if you can find some areas to grow, and let us know if we can help as you go forward. We would certainly love to see some of you in this next program. We've already got quite an interesting variety of organizations enrolled in it, so it should be a great program. And with that, I will open up for questions. Okay, I've gotten a question actually. The question is basically, does this program carry any certifications? Yes is the answer. It's a simple answer. We both created an internal certification, which we call our ALA Certified Graduate for the entire program, and actually just recently as well, the Scrum Alliance introduced a Certified Agile Leader program, which normally are 2-day classes that people would take to get what they call Cal Level 1 certification. The first 2 sessions of the ALA actually also will get you that Cal Level 1 certification. The entire program actually also meets all the criteria that are listed by the Scrum Alliance for what they call Cal Level 2, which is the top level of leadership certification that they offer. However, they've not yet formalized this program, so they are looking to do this in the next few months. So that you do get certifications from the program. Eventually, we'll get that Level 2 as soon as the Scrum Alliance makes it a real thing. I had another question. How many people are in each cohort? Last year, the cohort, we have a max of 25 right now. Last year we had, in the largest session, I believe we had 24. and I think the smallest one is about 21, so right around that, about 20 people or so in most of them. We try to keep it to a small group, and the sessions are led personally by Sanjeev and myself with almost, I believe in every session we had at least one co-presenter, and these are the folks, again, that tend to go on and be some of the mentors in the monthly mentor calls that we have. Another question I had, will the slides be available? Yes, indeed. Absolutely. We will share the slides with you, and we'll send out information following this webinar about where they'll be available. I've got another question. How are the site visits determined? Well, we actually, that is, Sanjeev and I have largely been to this point reaching out to our personal networks, of course, as consultants and Scrum trainers, and kind of tied into the community. We reach out to our peers and try to look for interesting stories that are varied and unique. So thus far, since we are running this program out of our office in Herndon, Virginia, we also, of course, have been picking places that are local to the office here. That being said, this program is going to expand globally. That is in the works now. I can't share the details of it yet, but it is going to happen. And at that point, we're actually setting up local site visits, and of course in other states, other countries that may meet the local populace and are relevant to them. So thus far, we tried to get a variety across commercial work, across private organizations, large companies, small companies, highly regulated, more fly by the seat of their pants kind of sexy new companies. For the record, the next site visit, the one in June, will be to Capital One Labs, one of their very forward-thinking, if you will, kind of skunkworks organizations that is out here as well, out in the Reston area. Okay, I've got another question. Regarding certification, you have PMP as project manager and PGMP for program management. Do you have anything similar to that in Agile management? Yes, the ones that I just mentioned. I would say currently the choices are limited. The Cal Level 1 is the one that I've seen be most prominent at this point. Otherwise, a lot of the Agile leaders out there have really been just going to traditional leadership programs, so Leadership 360 and the Leadership Circle and things of this nature, but none of those are in any way Agile specific. So that was part of the reason we created this program, in fact, and even set up a separate company. The Agile Leadership Academy is a separate company from LightSpeed, my consultancy, basically because we want other partners to be able to offer the certification as well. So the simple answer is the Scrum Alliance offers the Cal Level 1 and eventually Level 2, and we also offer our own certification. And those are the leadership certifications that are specific to agility that I know about. I'm have a few more minutes here for other questions. I think I see some others coming in. I will just mention in terms of site visits, and there seem to be some interest there. This year, we're still plotting out some of the site visits that we have, but one of the tentative ones, and I'm not promising this just yet because it is not finalized, but we're looking at visiting Fannie Mae. It's one of the other companies in this area that has been doing, especially in the past few years, a lot of very interesting things in the Agile space, and really has made impressive progress for such a large traditional organization. So we're looking at trying to set something up there to look at some of the nice forward-thinking things that they're doing. Here we go, another question. Do I determine which track I go in, or is it selected for me? For instance, I'm at a director level. Where would I be placed? The simple answer is it is selected for you. We try to place you with your peers, and you would be in the executive track. Although, that being said, I would say we are open to the executives moving wherever they want, actually. So if you are more interested in the topics at the management level, that is fine, and you're absolutely welcome to join the management sessions instead. Essentially, the way it's going to work is the sessions are going to repeat. So once you've gone through all the new sessions, the old ones will repeat. So after a few years, you'll eventually have experienced everything the program has to offer, and then it repeats. But Just speaking again back to my experience with the strategic coach program, it so happens that the repetition is not necessarily a bad thing, and that returning to perhaps certain types of exercises, workshops, thought processes that weren't that relevant a long time ago, it just so happens they often are relevant the next time you come across them, or they can be useful from multiple perspectives and situations. So that the repetition is also something that actually we think is beneficial at the end of the day. Okay, another question. What methodologies would you club in as Agile? So yes, officially speaking, I would say that these days you've got certainly the leading ones, Scrum by a pretty large margin. The Scaled Agile framework has taken on a life of its own for sure. We see quite a lot of usage of that in both the government space and the large commercial space out here in the DC area for certain. Kanban I would consider to be an Agile methodology. The Lean Startup actually is quite directly Agile methodologies and some other sort of product management, marketing sort of ideas lumped in with that. Those are probably the ones I would say are the leaders these days. If you'd like to read a little bit more about the specifics, I'd go and read the Agile Manifesto from 2001. That's when the term Agile was applied to, at the time, a lot of other methods. There were feature-driven development, Crystal, a lot of different ideas out there in the past that were DSDM was loosely considered an Agile method, dynamic systems development method. So there are a lot of them actually, but these days you've seen both an expansion and a combination of them. So that's I think been very beneficial. All right. Well, it seems that we are just about coming to the end here. So I do want to say, if any of you would like to contact us, please feel free. We'd be happy to dive deeper on any of the subjects I mentioned here, answer further questions for you. And you can see here that you can go to info@agileleadershipacademy.com, and we'll be able to get in touch with you there. We will be sharing the slides following the presentation.